In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening. What a joy for us all to be together this evening. This year, throughout the year, we're doing a panel every month of wise older women, or at least those of us who are getting wiser as we age. And so we welcome this evening Dana and Jill, Sandy, and Cammie. And we're so glad you could be with all of us this evening. To make this discussion about identity crisis. And I titled the lesson tonight, Who Am I Without You? Because as I was thinking and talking with some younger women in their 40s and 50s, that identity crisis can become a real issue. It can really affect us because as we're younger, we know who we are. We're a child, a daughter, we're a wife, we're a mother. But as we get older, some of those situations, those people leave our lives, and that leaves us wondering, who are we? Who am I? And a lot of times we see those changes women do in their 40s and 50s. Children grow up, they leave home, they marry, and they start families of their own without us. And then perhaps we retire from working, or our husbands retire, and then we begin that next phase of our life without having to get up every morning and go out to work. So that can make a change for us. Parents pass away or sometimes enter care facilities with memory issues so that they're no longer the same relationship as we've had before. And then, as it often happens too, husbands become incapacitated or they die, leaving us on our own. So tonight we want to talk about who am I without you? And I would also like to say that tonight's study is pre-recorded. So if you will make your comments, we're going to have our questions that we'll be talking about. We'll have them in the comments here, but just make your comments as you respond. We would love to hear from you, and we certainly will respond to you, and other viewers of the program will benefit from that as well. So, ladies, the first thing I'd like to talk about is, who am I without children in my home? How do we respond to that? Or, the children grow up, they leave home for work or for jobs. They marry, they start their own families, or they have a boyfriend, a fiance. They're not relying on us. We're not the main one anymore in their lives. So how does that affect our identity? How's a mother's identity tied up with that of her children?
We homeschooled our children, and so I was with them 24/7. And we did that all the way through high school. And when our last one left home, I guess I was in my mid to late 40s. And I remember how alone I was for a little while. I told my daughter-in-law when they got married that you have stolen my buddy. And he was my buddy. And my husband used to say, there is life without children, and it is wonderful. But it wasn't as wonderful at first. Yeah. And I think I don't know how you say that, oh, it doesn't affect me, because I think it will affect us, especially the closer we are to our children. And I hope you guys Christians we are.
Yeah.
But I know for myself, it was a concerted effort that I had to put forth and consciously think about, how do I rebuild these relationships with these grown children? Because I've done what I can do, and my kids are in their 40s now, and I still have an influence of a mother, but boy, it is limited in what.
Yeah.
I guess I have influence. I don't have any control.
No.
Right. Sandy, your kids are grown and gone, aren't they?
Yeah. And, every time we talk about this, I think about the day we took our daughter, who was our baby, to college. And we dropped her off. And I absolutely cried, ugly cried, boo-hooed, flooded the truck all the way home. And I wanted to close off her bedroom and cut it off the house. I couldn't stand to look at it without her there. Her furniture was gone. It was a really hard thing. We were both working at that time. And it took us maybe about a month to realize, hey, this is not so bad. We don't have to worry about anybody but ourselves. We would meet after work for dinner, didn't have to worry about cooking for anybody else. It really turned out quite well, although we miss her and we're still close to her, very close to her. Mm-hmm. And, it's never the same, but it's like moving to a new country. You have to learn to live in those circumstances with those rules. And, we get through it. It's a temporary thing, like you said before. So now she's facing this with her children.
Yeah.
When our youngest son was in college is when we got the opportunity to move from Georgia to New York City. And we got that opportunity because we didn't have kids at home. I don't think we would have moved teenage children to the city, but we had lived in one place for about 9 years, and everybody knew us as that family. I have 3 boys. They're loud and rude and we were just a package deal. And I realized when I met the new Christians and we were sitting in a circle of women for a women's class one time and talking about ourselves, and I realized, like, these people don't know me because they don't know my children like I am. We come as a package. And I knew who I was. I wasn't suffering with identity crisis, but I began to realize I have to redefine myself. These people. So it was just an awakening of, like, it came all at once. Like, okay, let's get this started. And then 2 of my 3 sons moved to the area. One came back, the youngest came back and went to college. The other one moved to preach. And now I introduce myself as Tim's mom and Dan's mom, because that's,
yeah.
But there just comes a time when you have to start stepping into that next stage where you are the same person you were, but what you do is different, and you make yourself valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Jill, you wanted to say?
My turn, yeah.
Yes.
I think part of it is how you prepare yourself and them for these transitions in life, because the one thing about life we know that is sure, death and taxes, but also change. We know that there's changes that have already happened and changes that are coming, but some of these are really big transitions, like Sandy was saying, the day you do that, she still remembers. But, I tried to keep in mind, even when my children were tiny, I'm raising someone to become an adult. And I'm preparing them for this. This is a big transition for them too.
Right.
And, there's always a part of me, but.
Whenever it's my
turn. I think that was a good point, Cammie, that people don't know who we are when they don't know our history. And so when after our children were grown, we moved down to Florida, and it was just us. And we had to, we didn't reinvent ourselves. We didn't make ourselves be somebody different, but it was, what do you like to do? Well, we always did things with the kids, and so now we have to find what we like to do just with us. It does make a difference. I think one of the things I was thinking about was that too often when if younger women neglect their children, perhaps to maintain their own identities. I see that with a younger generation. If I don't want to get too tied up with my kids, I don't want to get my kid, my identity as the mother. But we have to have that balance because we are who we are, but we are raising those children in the Lord. So what are some tips that we can give women, perhaps even in their 20s and 30s, as they're raising children, to maintain your own self, but still to give your focus to your children?
I can go.
Cami, what do you think?
That's okay. I really have loved this topic and studying this and meditating on it and things like that. And it took me to the example of Mary, the mother of Christ, because she was chosen for her character when she was a very young girl. And her statement is, "Who am I?" She says, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it me to be according to your will." That's who she was when she was chosen. And she served a very important role in the mothering of Jesus and bringing him up in the law. We have all the examples of that they followed the law carefully. They ran away to Egypt to save his life, even and things she didn't really understand, but she was a very faithful to the will of God in raising that child. But as the story goes on, I love that we're given little insights into her life. It became less important that she was his mother for that time when they showed up outside to take him home because he was working too hard. And he said, "Who are my mother and brothers?" I mean, that's a part of every adult's life who's going to follow the Lord. And then it goes on. She's one, but she is still faithful. She follows with the other women who follow and serve him until when she is in with the saints waiting after the crucifixion. It doesn't matter that she's the Lord's mother anymore. I'm sure they gave her, there was a relationship there, but it didn't matter. She is now a believer with all the other believers. So through that entire childhood, she just was the maidservant of the Lord.
Really good point. One of the things I was thinking about in this, and it kind of goes along with what Jill said, but we need to, as we're remembering that we are servants of the Lord and we are raising our children to be servants of the Lord. I think one of the ways we avoid becoming, so many parents raise their children and want them to be what they didn't get to be. Mm-hmm. And so there's this sense of vicariousness. And I think we need to make certain that we are molding our children and preparing them to be the adults they're supposed to be, but to be their own person. I have 3 kids. Y'all probably had multiple kids as well. I know Cami had 3 boys, and I have 2 boys, and they were as different as day and night. I used to say I had a man of the tents and a man of the fields because they were so different. And my daughter, again, different on top of that. And for me to try to make them all in one pattern doesn't work. And I need to hone in on what their interests are, not what mine are, but what their skill set is. And I think when we do that, we can spawn off a lot of, we can avoid a lot of rebellion and resistance from them, and even in their life and their walk with God, and help that walk with God be a daily interaction with what they love. We can. I have one that is a builder, and there's just so many opportunities that you can use to show him how he can glorify God in what he loves to do. And each of them, we can do that. And if we fail to do that, if we try to make them what we want them to be, then they're going to rebel and they're going to reject everything I stand for, which is everything underlined with God. And I think that's so important that we bring God into their lives in everything we do and everything they do, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Well, ladies, so one other thing I'd like for us to say to women in their 40s and 50s as their children are leaving the home and going on to further service to the Lord and marriage and, and so forth. What are the benefits for us spiritually? What are some things now we get a chance to do that before we didn't either have time, or maybe we didn't have opportunity, or we didn't have the resources or whatever? I know for myself, it has been being able to teach Bible classes and to not to spend that time in not have to worry about little kids. I remember trying to teach an adult class of ladies when I had little children, and it was just nerve-wracking. And now it's no problem. Cammie, I know you're doing a good bit of teaching. That's one of the benefits, wouldn't you say?
It is. And quiet time to study. That's one of the things you hear most from sincere young moms is, I just don't get any quiet time with my Bible anymore. And I remind them, you prayed for children, and children don't come with quiet time. This is the season.
Right.
But we do have time for quiet and concentration. Most of us do anyway, I'm assuming, and study and to teach uninterrupted. It is a real blessing.
And Dana, you've been writing, haven't you?
Yes. And that was something I always wanted to do. And and I'm very easily distracted. So everything has to be perfect for me to sit down and write. And I need long blocks of time for me. And that I couldn't do with children. And I've been able to do that, and I think that's huge. One of the things that was said earlier, I've always been religious minded. And so God has always been important. And that hasn't changed throughout all of my stages in my life. And I'm a very, very, very curious person about everything. That hasn't changed. And I think, and I love to do crafts and quilting, and that hasn't changed, but boy, it has changed as far as the times I have to do those things.
Right. Jill, I know you've noticed it because you're a seamstress, I know. What other thing?
So what I was going to say is that it's given me more opportunity to be together with my husband and develop that relationship, which started before the kids came, and we don't need to block him out, I'm very fortunate to still have him because he's been through some health issues, and I'm really appreciating that right now.
That's very good. Sandy, how about you? You've had a major health crisis in your life. I know we've talked about it before. Right. Sandy had a liver transplant, right? Wow. She was at death's door and had a liver transplant. And we've had 6. I love how your daughter calls it bonus years with Sandy since then. But what do you find now that are benefits of the empty nest?
Well, like everybody said, I have more time for prayer. I have more time for Bible study. And it has led both of us, my husband and myself, into doing that more, and getting so much more out of it, because you have all these life experiences that you can apply to what you're reading and what you're understanding. And when our daughter was in high school, she was a drum major for the band, and Jill can tell you about this because, Doug, but he was the band director. Yeah. We would leave the house at like 6 a.m. and we'd get home at 10 at night. And this was daily. Weekends were even worse. So when she graduated, she said, somebody asked me what I do or something. And she said, oh, well, Mom's life is gone now because I went to college. And it's like she really thought that was my whole life, because it was so involved. But, it did take a learning process, a learning curve, to do that, because these different stages in our life, it doesn't happen like you go from stage A to stage B and all of a sudden you know what you're doing in B. It's a learning process. And there were times it was really hard and I didn't want to do that. But now we enjoy our time. We have quiet time. We were talking today. I don't even want to get dressed and go out of the house. I'm comfortable at home. I'm happy at home. And when I was in my 40s and 50s, I did not want to be home like that. I wanted to be go, 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 do. And now it's nice just to take time to relax and enjoy your life as it is. The church is such a big part of that life. And without the people there, it would be so much more difficult. So it's given us time to develop all of this as we grow older. And I'm like Jill, I'm very fortunate. I haven't lost my husband yet, although he almost lost me. So, I don't want to look to that point, to that part of my life yet, because I'm not ready for that. I'm still in this stage. Yeah. So when I get to that point and I have to do it, then, we'll face it. We'll deal with it with the Lord's help.
Well, and so I think the message we would like to send is that while going through this empty nesting, those last few years that your kids are at home, and as you're thinking, oh no, they're going to be gone the last time I'll do this and the last time I'll do that with the children. Just remember, there's a life on the other side, and it's really rather pleasant. So, well, you will have much that you can do to serve the Lord, to serve others, and to do good works for God's glory. There will be very much that you can do. And so going through this can be a difficult thing, but this is my pet phrase is when parents say, oh, I'm just so sad they're growing up and they're going away from home. My question always in my mind, I hardly ever say it, is don't feed them. Why are you feeding these people? If you don't feed them, they won't grow, and then they'll but that's our goal, isn't it? I mean, that's our plan. That's our goal. Yeah. We have them to raise them and send them on. Another thing that happens, another transition, not so much in the 40s and 50s as later on, maybe in our 60s, when we retire, when we leave the workplace. I always wanted to be a school teacher. I started teaching when my kids were into school, into kindergarten age. And I worked in education for 30 years. And then it was time to retire for various reasons. I was old enough and in the family situations. And it was like, I was thinking, and that whole year before I retired, I was like, well, now, who am I going to be without being Mrs. King, the teacher, the school principal? Who am I going to be? I'm just going to be me. And so I think retirement can be and it is such a blessing when you're done with working and finished with getting up every morning and going out to work. But there can be some changes in your life that maybe you didn't anticipate. And the first question I'd like for us to discuss maybe is, how does our identity get tied up with our workplace? For me, I always told my teachers when I was principal, teaching is not just a job that we go to in the morning and we do and we turn it off when we go home. We are teachers. That's who we are. And that does tie your identity up. And I find myself still a teacher, just in a different kind of teaching. I know, Jill, you taught as well, not as long as I did, I don't think.
No, we had 3 young children at home, and I'll tell you, it's hard for 5 people to live on one teacher's salary. So my husband offered to send me to school, and so this is something I did for him. So I didn't consider it as much my identity, but it grew to be that way, and during that period of time I was working, my children, went through school, and they had their dad for band class. And so, but when you become a teacher, like you said, Isla, you're a teacher all day long, no matter where you are in the community, you're still a teacher at that school, and the school board has expectations of who you are and your identity,
Yeah.
as well as family and the church. And sometimes it's difficult when you are influenced as a Christian in the workplace, and yet your identity is a loyalty to your employer. You have a contract situation with them, then you're bound by honor to do those things you're asked to do. It can become difficult.
Yeah.
What
So
helped me
we
with
can-
retirement, I was ready to retire. My job was actually changing. And now they won't let you come back and volunteer the first year you're retired from the school system, where I was anyway. But volunteering in someone else's classroom helped me with that transition and that identity.
Yeah.
Because my husband was still working and I retired before him. And so I was loose and fancy free. And it was fun for a while, but it got old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just one coping mechanism with retirement is to do a little something still along. Dana, so you were homeschooling.
I homeschooled my
full-time work.
children, and we lived in the Caribbean during most of that time, and then my children went off to college, and if you will, that was my career change. And I'm like Cammie, the last one that went to college, we made a major move and moved back to the States. And so, you step into this life of not a mommy anymore, and you change that identity. My husband is a preacher, and so, and I know Cammie can relate to that. That's my identity, and that's tied up in that. And I'm a preacher's wife, and I've always been a preacher's wife, and that changes in some ways. Every congregation we've been in congregations that are close to 300 he's preached at, and we've been in them that are as small as 15 and 20. So and he's still working, and so as long as he's working, I'll still be a preacher's wife. But I'm not sure that that work would necessarily change if he retired, other than we're growing old and slowing down, and that is a reality.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I can speak to this in the same way someone who worked like you two did outside the work. My work very isolated. I mean, very, very confined to the church.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you have a different group of people that you would relate to than what Jill and I. And Sandy, you had a job in the public sector, I guess we call it, or private sector, whatever.
I worked for a cable TV company, and all of you have probably called the cable company and just really had a fit on them. And so we took those calls all the time. And even as a manager, it was, you were on, like the teachers, you were on all the time because people in the community knew you worked there. We had a new member at church one time, and he's like, I called them and they, and so you're supposed to be that liaison, to smooth things over. But I had to go on disability when I was 50. And it was really, really hard, much harder than I thought it would be. And I went through a real depression for quite a while. And I ended up getting a dog, which turned it around for me. I had a purpose to get up and feed her and take care of her. It kind of put some substance back there. But when my husband got ready to retire, I was scared to death because for all of these years, I either worked or I was on my own, as far as during the daytime, and he was working. I didn't know if we could be together 24/7 and still get along and be happy. So there again, there was a period of adjustment, but now he said, I didn't work all last year because he worked a part-time job for a while. And it's like, wow, that was a quick year. It went by really fast. So we've adjusted once
Yeah.
again, to our new life that we have. So.
Right. Cammy, you're still in like Dana is, aren't you? Still working?
Not outside the home anymore. I got my
Right.
beginning to work kind of transition, or it was a transition between the kid years because I saw a friend, a Christian friend that I really admired, and she had gone back to teaching, and I said something about it, and she said, "Yeah," and she named her husband. He made me go back to work so I could let my kids leave home. And I just kind of muddled that thought for a little while, but then I began to realize when my kids got middle school and early high school, that's when I got a part-time job. The money was nice. I was able to be home, but it really did help me to have this thing I did. Not so it wasn't a fun or good job, but when everybody started talking about things, I had more than like I was just waiting for you guys to get home here and talk about it. So I worked for 25 years at just random little part-time jobs. I worked full-time a little bit. So I didn't officially retire. When we moved across to New Jersey, my work was kind of ending and I made a move that made the commute. So I didn't officially retire. I didn't have anything to retire from. But when Dana was speaking, I think that's what will hit me hard is when Don retires. It will change my identity. And while he mentions it, I'm like, no, you don't retire yet. So
Gotcha.
there is.
Well, we always say, Tola always says, well, we'll have to die before he retires. We can't afford to retire. So,
But when you're working, even my jobs were never anything of like a career. I worked for Weight Watchers for a while in New York City. And in New York City, it made sense. There were no non-working people in our church in New York City. In New York City, you survive by working. And so it was good that I had something. But it makes you a commuter. It puts you in touch with a lot of people and experiences. And it just becomes a change when everyone goes around the room and say, what do you do? And then your answer is I'm retired. That's just a weird answer. I do a lot of things, but your category is retired. So
it's retired. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a husband's retirement, whether you're still working or not, can be an issue. Wallace retired. We were farming, and we sold the production side of the farming while we still lived there. So he was retired, but I was still working. I had several more years before I could collect a pension. So it was kind of funny. And it was, how do you figure out the jobs? Because he's home and he would take a part-time job that came along, from time to time. But it was like, is it right that I should work all day and then do all the work at home too? And I was trying to, and I'm one of those blessed women. He cooked all the time. So at least it was that I never had to cook. But when he was retired, we couldn't do things because I was still working and so on. But there is a lot of adapting that needs to be done. But as Jill and Sandy have said, once you get through some of those adapting and making that transition, it's very pleasant. It's very nice to be able to, today we'll go here and we'll just pick up and go. We don't have to make big plans and call off work or anything like that. It can be a real joy. One of the things I found was that I had a number of work friend relationships that were, and it was really, it was an odd situation for me being a teacher. I always had teacher friends, but then when I was a school principal, the situation changes. You're the boss. And Sandy, that's what you found too with you were the boss. So
exactly.
While there was a relationship, an acquaintance and a friendship sort of, it wasn't the same as equals. Like when Jill, as you were teaching, you were all teachers, equal relationships.
I stayed away from all the courses that would head me in that administrative position.
Yes. It's definitely a unique situation. So, but when I when I retired, we were ready to move from that town. We'd only moved there for the job. And I said, I don't want to be Mrs. King, the principal, the rest of my life. I want to just be me, So we ended up moving to Florida. But that was a little drastic. But like you said, y'all's situation, Dana and Cammy's, your situation changed. And so moving gave you a chance to not to reinvent, but to sort of almost a restart of who I am, adapt to who I am. And that's what I did as well. But
One of the
you live
comments.
those work. Yes.
I was going to say, one of the comments somebody made earlier was talking about, that people didn't know who you were when your children left home and so on and so forth. I think it's interesting. We have moved a lot with the work that my husband does and has done. He's done a lot of what you might say mission work out of the country. And so we've moved a couple of times out of the country and moved back to the States and moved from one state to another state. And it is fascinating to me because who we are today is very different in people's eyes from whom we were in the islands. And we lived such a drastically different kind of lifestyle in another culture. And it's fascinating when you're sitting and you're talking with people and the more you get acquainted with them, the more you tend to talk about your past and you talk about things you've done, and you get the oddest looks because they're like, you did that? You poured concrete and operated the concrete mixer, Dana? Because they don't see that in me. And I think that is a fascinating thing as we get older. All of us will have that in our lives. Things we did in our 20s and our 30s and even our 40s. If you move to a group of people who don't know all of that, you're a very different person. You really can reinvent yourself. You really can. But you can also feel kind of lost and isolated because they don't really know you. And so I think that's something you have, it's the different stages in our lives. We have to just weave ourselves through them. And we have the one constant, we all at least have the one constant of God in our lives, and that and the church. And those relationships are very consistent and constant.
Absolutely. Sandy?
Well, I feel like, excuse me, we don't really move from phase A to phase B and become a totally different person, although we are different. But we build on those, So I'm still that person that worked at Comcast, and I'm still Greg and Lisa's mother, and and mother-in-law and grandmother. I mean, all of those added. So I've expanded who I am as I grew through the years. And, that's the way I try to look at it. Each of those experiences added to who I am today.
We get the opportunity to.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Cammie, fine.
We get the opportunity to have, not just more time for service in Lord's work, but I think our relationships can strengthen. We have an opportunity for relationships that we didn't before. I was thinking, we were talking about children leaving, the people we've had in our life now, young people that were like a mom to, or like a dad to, and other people's children that aren't our grandchildren, but they aren't my children either. I just laugh at their misbehavior. I just think it's kind of fun. And I can be that person that says, it's fine, they'll outgrow that, because I'm not stressed like it was. So we have that kind of relationships. I try to stay really busy. I had a very, very busy morning this morning, but I could do those things at any time today. So if you called me at 10 and you needed something, like, okay, I'm free at 10, I'm free at 12, I'm free at 1. So I think we just have some opportunities to not just do more things, but strengthen the way we are for people too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. Jill?
I was going to say, there are some things we leave behind because we want to leave them behind too. We're still growing and learning and becoming who we are. And I just turned 70, but I'm still not done yet, improving myself as to who do I want to be when I'm presented before the King for judgment. That's what we always have to keep in mind. And there's some things we're happy to leave behind, like all those stresses and things that you're talking about. And
you're right.
Some other things we're sad to leave behind because we enjoyed them when it was that time.
Yeah.
Right.
We have to keep our goal in mind,
That's right.
and we
That's
can be
right.
happy with
Well,
who we're becoming.
I like that. And I think those comments are all wonderful endings, or kind of put a bow around what we've been talking about of the transitions of life, from when your children leave home till you retire, till your husband retires, and those home situations change for you. And it's not the end of life.
Mm-mm.
It's not all, oh, woe is me, and what am I going to do now? It's a time for transition, for looking at what can I do next? What's the next phase of my life? How can I serve the Lord? How can I do good works to glorify Him? How can I grow as a Christian in knowledge? And how can I use my experiences and what I know to help others? So this has really been a wonderful discussion, ladies, and I appreciate you being with us today. And as we've put on the screen several times, this is pre-recorded, but make your comments and we will definitely respond to them. We would like to let you know that next month in March, we're going to start talking about the joy of setting and pursuing goals. And just like Jill said, it's when your children leave home, when you retire, there are more goals for you to set and to pursue in your life, and in your life as a Christian, as so many things that you can do, and we don't just stop, and our life does not end. Please be sure to watch Older Women Likewise every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we also encourage you to watch Answering Religious Error on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock Eastern. Wonderful lessons presented. Be sure that you watch the Bible Q&A on Wednesdays at noon, so that you can, if you have Bible questions, you send them, and they will certainly be glad to answer them. Every day, Monday through Friday, Cindy Dunnigan's husband, Mark, does a daily answer podcast and does a wonderful job with that. So be sure that you listen to that. That is encouragement and edification for each of us. So I would like to say, ladies, thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate your time. And I hope that, and I'm glad to hear this study was beneficial for you personally, as well as for you to be able to help others and to teach others. So thank y'all so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yeah.